Today's tutorial is for this super cute little handbag. Perfect for a hand carry like this or in the crook of your arm. Based on tester feedback and customer feedback, I've even added the option of a crossbody strap. That'll be a bonus in the back of the pattern. So you add just some hidden D-rings on the inside of your bag here. And then you have a cute little crossbody. Also in the instructions, I show you how to make these rolled handles, or there is even a flat handle option with no raw edges. When the handles are folded down, you don't see any raw edges, which is pretty cool. Inside has a recessed zipper. The sides snap shut and open for a different look. You open up that recessed zipper and you have two slip pockets on the inside as well. This back pocket is perfect for quick access to your phone. Who's ready to make one of these? I will be showing you how to make both style handles today, but for right now, I'm gonna jump right into doing the rolled handles because this style, the edge is left raw, so I will need to paint them, and I'll wanna allow adequate dry time in between the layers. So I'm gonna jump right into doing this, and then we'll do all our other prep work for all the other pieces. So real important, today I'm using cowhide leather, and this Magenta, it's a lighter weight. So I've added reinforcement strips of Ecoweld light to the ends, and I've transferred my rivet holes from the pattern piece onto this. And then we're gonna go ahead and add our cording and jump right into creating this handle. So I've tried all different types of cording. This is a cotton filler cord, and then this is more of a polypropylene roping. I find with leather, I get a nice looking handle no matter what I use, but my testers said that if they were using cork or vinyl, they got a better handle using a firmer cording like this. So I got a big old roll from my local hardware store. It was like 100 feet for like $6, so relatively inexpensive. And we're gonna, so today's make, I'm gonna go ahead and use this. All right, so we wanna finish off these this short edge so it looks nice. So I'm gonna use double-sided tape for that because I find that it holds the folds easiest. So I'm just kind of folding, adding the tape about a 1/4 inch from each side here. And then I will fold those raw edges in. And if you find that this double-sided tape kind of gums up your needle, the Dritz wash away or a Wonder Tape, I believe is another option, is better for the domestic machines. The Tandy Leather brand is also a really good one. I'm going to be using my industrial walking foot, so this one that usually doesn't have an issue with this style tape, but it has been tested on domestic machines, so you can do this. You just have to pick the appropriate materials for your machine, a lighter weight vinyl, cork, or leather. So I'm just rolling these edges into the tape. And then I like to keep a hammer close by because before I go to sew this down, I want to hammer that down just to keep them, reduce bulk and keep them nice and flat. All right, so now we're going to take it to the machine, and from the top edge, we're going to sew an 1/8 inch from the edge, stopping where it starts to narrow in on both edges. We just sewed the edges here, so now we're gonna flip it over. I did just draw my center line because this is where the roping is gonna go. Now we're gonna go ahead and add our rectangle rings to each end. The interfacing, the reinforcement strips that are on the edge here are super important. I can't emphasize enough not to skip that part because I have tried it without. You don't get the same nice looking strap ends, and you want that reinforcement in this area. So don't skip it. So we just line up these rivet holes, put them through and add your cap. You'll hear that it snaps into place, but you do need to set it. So I have my hand press here, and I'm gonna go ahead and set those rivets. Okay. So now that I have my center line, I'm gonna add a strip of double-sided tape just to kind of keep my cording in place, but this area is going to go ahead and get glued. Peel that back. Grab my cording. So this one is a polypropylene, so you can either burn the edge so it doesn't fray, or I added some clear tape at the 11-inch mark, and then I cut it in half right at that tape. So I don't know if you can see that clear tape, but we're just gonna lay this centered. And then I kind of pull these little ends up, so if anything it goes over that and you can't see the end of the cording in your pocket here. So then we're gonna take our glue, add it all over here, fold it and clip it and give it a chance to dry. All right, so once you've given this enough time to dry, we're gonna go ahead and sew as close to this cording as humanly possible. So I have swapped out to my zipper foot so that this edge can ride right up against this. So the trickiest part is getting up here where your rectangle ring's kind of in the way. You're just gonna have to do your best to push it and manipulate it out of the way so that you can get really close up here. So pinch it. Get it under your machine as best as you can. And again, it's not the easiest, but do your best you can. It's kind of caught on my ring there. Now you're probably wondering why we make this part so big and why there's all this excess. I did that because either you can take your straight edge ruler and your rotary cutter and tuck it under there as best as you can and get a close cut this way, and you need something to grab onto or it's very difficult. Likewise with the sharp scissors, you need something to have to grab, because if you already have it really close to the edge and you go to cut it, you're gonna keep falling off the edge and you won't get a clean cut. So grab the sharpest scissors you've got. That's non-existent in my house since my kids have taken all my scissors and dulled them. But we're gonna use these and we're gonna go 1/8 inch from this sewn line. Take nice long cuts so that they're not jagged. And you get one chance, unfortunately, with this. Because if you say, oh, I'm gonna go, you know, 1/4 inch and then I can always take more, again, your scissors are gonna kind of fall off that little edge. So take your time, do it right the first time. Ideally, you should have a nice clean edge here. And you can either leave it as is, just like this, or in my case, I'm gonna go ahead and edge paint it. So I'm gonna be using this Giardini brand. I chose a nice magenta to match my leather. But for this brand, you do need the base coat dense to go on first. And I tend to put 2 layers of this, sanding in between, and then only needing 1 or 2 coats of the color. So that's why we jump right into the strap, so that I can allow that adequate dry time and not sit around waiting for this to dry in between steps. So right now we're gonna go ahead and get that first layer on our edge here. The thing to keep in mind is you just want to do a light initial coat. You want the base coat to saturate and get into the leather. You don't want to gob it on. One, it'll take longer to dry, and two, you want the color to have something to adhere to, and that's what this base coat does. So just put it on lightly around the edge here. This will also help kind of fill in that channel of the 2 layers of leather. And then when we sand it down after this is dried, you shouldn't be able to see that seam at all. So just add it on. I find that the base coat dries really quickly, but the manufacturer does recommend giving at least 20 to 30 minutes of dry time in between these layers. So now that that is on, I'm gonna set it aside, give it a chance to dry, and we're gonna go prep all our other materials. By prep work, I mean we're gonna go ahead and cut out all of our pieces. For the main exterior, you're cutting the full height of this pattern piece out for these 2 pieces, as well as the side gusset pieces, you're doing the full length. It's the Ecoweld light that you're gonna be cutting at the folded line. So you're gonna have a whole inch gap along the top that has no interfacing on these pieces, and then your liner you're cutting at that folded line as well. So on your main panel pattern piece, there are bottom markings. We do want to transfer those onto our pattern here along the bottom, and then I'm gonna go ahead and fold all of my pieces in half and mark the centers along the top and the bottom of these pieces. And then our handle accents, we want to draw the lines up the center, and then the slip pocket accents, we're going to draw the lines up the center. I'm going to also show you how to do the flat handle option, so I'm going to get those prepped ready to go as well by drawing the lines up the center. All of my pieces now have their center markings on them. I've transferred any of the pattern markings onto it, including my purse feet on the exterior bottom base, and I've also added the Peltex interfacing. You can use Peltex or Ecoweld Heavy on this area as well, and I do add 2 pieces, one to the exterior as well as the liner. So now I'm going to jump back into my handles in between this because I've had enough dry time of the first base coat. I'm going to take some 800 grit sandpaper and give it a light sanding just to get any of the bubbles or the fray, the excess glue on the side. And then I'm going to go ahead and do another coat of the dense edge coat before I go into the color. So wipe off any frays and add the base coat. Again, while I'm waiting for my handles to dry, I'm going to continue to do the prep work. So these are my strap accents with the line drawn up the back side. I'm going to add some double-sided tape down the center of each piece, and I'm going to fold those long edges in to this line. This part you won't be sewing over the tape, so if you would rather do the tape along each edge and fold it to the center line so it has a little bit more stick, by all means. I find this to be adequate for me, so I just stick with only the one layer. But then you're going to peel off the backing, and I can still see my line under the tape, so then I'm going to just fold those edges in. Just like that. Just butt it up to that other raw edge. We're going to do this to all 4 pieces here, and then on this wrong side from the top edge we're going to measure down 2 inches. So from that top edge on the seam side I'm putting a marking 2 inches down. So we're gonna do essentially a false stitch. We're gonna do an 1/8 inch down here, stopping right here, and also on this side, stopping here. We're gonna pull the threads to this wrong side and tie them off. This is gonna be the side that gets wrapped around the handle, so the stitching will be continuous around that when we actually sew the accent onto the purse. So the 2 inches is pretty important when it comes to the flat handle and also this, so that we use that as our landmark for when we're wrapping it around. So I tend to eyeball things, but I don't recommend this part eyeballing it. Measure out the 2 inches and then sew it up. I have my 2 inch markings on all my pieces. This is the seam side. And we're gonna start at the top edge and sew an 1/8 inch down to that 2 inch marking. Stop right there, pull the threads out. We're gonna tie those, pull them up to the front here, this back side, and tie them off. So all you do is you give it a gentle tug until you see that loop, and you pull it back. There we go. This I'm just gonna snip. These are gonna be hidden, but this bottom edge, you want it to look nice and clean without the back stitching. So I'll tie those off, singe them, and then repeat the process for all of those handles. Now that these have had their false stitches done, I'm gonna go ahead and add another layer up the center of the tape. We use a lot of tape on here, but the good news is this isn't gonna be in any of our seams. So this is just to help keep things positioned nicely. I'm a big fan of tape, especially since you can't really pin leather, cork, or vinyl. I still have to wait for the paint on my handles to dry, so I'm gonna jump right into another prep step. Set these aside. So that's gonna be my interior and back slip pocket. So for the front, because it's in the same cotton material, I have doubled the height, added some woven interfacing, and then we're gonna fold it wrong sides together. I'm gonna add this accent strip along the top here. And because as the pattern is written for waterproof canvas, I've left this a single layer. So this plastic coating is the back side. If you're gonna use something other than waterproof canvas for the inside of the bag, you're gonna wanna interface it accordingly. And you may wanna double this height just like this to fold it back and interface it as well, because you don't want to have a really flimsy pocket, but waterproof canvas has a nice little firmness without any added interfacing. So I'm gonna go ahead and cut more double-sided tape. I'm gonna put it on both edges of the long edge on these accent strips. So I tend to like more of a 1/8 inch tape width. So I just kind of go up the length of this. I don't really need as much. Now, unfortunately, you will be sewing through this part, so be mindful of that. If you would prefer to do glue or whatever you find to work if your machine bites you, or definitely stick with those other types of tape that don't gum up the needle as bad that I mentioned earlier. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and peel those off now. I'm leaving this as the bottom edge because that's gonna be lined up with my base. This top edge, I'm gonna line it up with that center marking we did, right in the middle there. Press it into the adhesive and then fold this top edge over. There we go. We're gonna take it to our machine and just sew along this bottom edge on both of these pieces. So I'm gonna repeat that process with this piece. And if you do decide not to do this accent piece, then for sure go ahead and double the height of the interior pocket piece and just leave it a folded edge and then top stitch that. That will be too flimsy as is without that top accent piece, even if you are using the waterproof canvas. Fold it over. And now we're gonna walk over to the machine and top stitch both of these pieces. Just gonna set these pieces aside now. And now that this second base coat layer is dry, I did sand it already, and now I'm ready to add my color. And I find that this particular color in the box dries almost like a clear versus the other one has a more, the other colors seem to have more of an opaqueness to them. And sometimes I only need the one layer. This one, depending on how it dries, I may have to go back with another color, another coat. It all depends on the layering and the look you're going for. But once this is added, you have a nice durable edge, and there's no chance that the layers of the leather on this will split apart. So I'm a big fan of completing any of our raw edged projects with paint. But if you don't want to do the paint, you don't think you'll do it much, or you don't see the value in it, or whatever the reason is, take the time to just rub a clear drying glue on your vinyl or leather or cork projects, because those pieces can tend to fray over time, and those definitely show way more wear and tear than I've found with leather. All right, first layer is on. Continuing on with our more prep work. So now we're going to take that completed interior slip pocket and grab one of our interior main pieces, and we're going to lay that on top, lining up those center markings. Then I'm going to take a removable marking tool and draw a line up that center. And we're going to create 2 slip pockets here. So in order to create those slip pockets, what I like to do is to start here, go down along the bottom, and I'll go about an 1/8 inch up from the center line across the top, 1/8 inch down the other side, across the bottom, and end it here. Then I'll erase this mark and add a rivet there for that stress point, but that's optional. You do have the 2 rows of stitching, so it should be just fine. And then you'll have your 2 usable slip pockets. I've erased that center line. I did add a rivet, so now our interior slip pockets are done. We're gonna set that aside. My handles are still drying, so I'm gonna take this opportunity to go ahead and show you how to do the flat handle option. You obviously wouldn't be making both style handles, but because I do offer both of those in the instructions, I'm gonna show you how to do that right now. I drew the line down the center, and because I'm using leather, I recommend leather, vinyl, or cork for the handles. If you don't want to and you prefer to stick with all fabric for even the accent pieces, you're welcome to do that. You'll just want to make sure you interface this piece with the Ecoweld light to give it a nice sturdy handle feel. So if you're doing fabric, all you have to do is iron these long edges to the center line, but because I am using leather, I can't iron it, obviously. I'm going to use this tape and fold it into the tape. I'm stopping a couple inches from each end here because we're going to need to sew those together, and I don't want to deal with any tape at this moment in my seam allowance yet. Okay, so peel that off, fold it to your center line, like so. There you go. You're not going to want to use a really thick leather for these, or a vinyl, because Like I said, there's gonna be seams here unless you plan to skive those ends. I would highly recommend that if your leather is thicker. This one is probably about a 2-ounce leather, so it's very manageable, pretty lightweight and drapey, so I'm not worried about the thickness on those ends. All right, now I'm gonna go ahead and mark the centers on this inner seam side. Right here. And right here. Okay, now I'm gonna take, this is the top portion of your handle, the long edge. This is the bottom portion of your handle, the shorter edge. We're gonna take right sides together, open them up, and clip these in place and sew a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Then we're gonna press this seam open and finish the folding on the inside. Because this is leather, I'm gonna add some more tape and finish off with tape here and finish it off that way. Okay, using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. You do want to back stitch at the beginning and end on this because we're gonna be pressing that seam open and you don't want it to start unraveling. I'm gonna add some double-sided tape to press this open. Add the more where I had stopped it a couple inches from the edge here. And then finish off our fold. So you can see it's getting a little thick there where the seam is. So I'm gonna go ahead and hammer that so it's as flat as possible. And we're gonna repeat with the other side after we slide on our rectangle rings. It's a little bulky. Literally just hammering it as flat as possible with the hammer. So now we're going to take our rectangle rings and thread them on. And then you're going to make sure to flip it upside down so your right side is up and line these up. You want to make sure that you're mindful of it coming up like this. You don't want to accidentally twist it. So right sides to right sides, we're gonna go ahead and repeat that same process. 1/4 inch seam allowance, press them open, and then fold it back in, and I'll show you what to do after that. The shorter end of the handle, which is the bottom, is along the top. This is the longer loop along the bottom. So we're gonna do more of that little false stitching we did with the accent handles. So from the joining seam right here, we're gonna measure 2 inches down and draw a line on the seam side right here. Again, this one's important that you don't just eyeball it roughly 2 inches down because we want it to look like a continuous seam when we sew it. And if you come short, you're gonna have some stitches missing and you'll definitely notice you eyeballed it. So now we're gonna go to our machine and with our needle down in that joining seam with the center seam face up, we're gonna sew an 1/8 inch, stopping at this 2 inch line, pull the threads to the side and tie them off on both edges on both sides of this. I'm literally starting my needle in that joining seam. And we're gonna sew up this edge just to my line. Make sure your needle is in that channel of the seam. And sew it in. There we go. And repeat on this side. Just gonna tug all the threads to this wrong side and tie them off. This is what you're left with. You got your false stitches looking good on this side. Now I'm gonna go ahead and add some double-sided tape to the seam side on the short piece because I can't pin it being leather. You could if it was fabric, or feel free to use clips to keep it all lined up. I'm using the adhesive because it's right in the center and it will be out of our seam allowance, and I find it the easiest way to keep it all lined up. Go ahead and remove the paper backing from your adhesive. Slide a rectangle ring to each end, and then we're going to flip it so it's wrong sides together now. And then we're going to line up those center markings right over each other and press in place. Take your time making sure the top edge is lined up perfectly right over the bottom edge. Get it all nice and smooth. So now we're going to go to the sewing machine, and with the joining seam face up, we're going to sew down the long edge starting at where the false stitches left off, pivot at the corner, sew in the ditch of the joining seam, back up the other side, and finish off sewing in the ditch on the opposite edge, and we'll pull the threads up and off and tie them off. Then you'll have a no raw edge strap that looks pretty on both sides. Last but not least, I like to add a couple of rivets here that prevents the rectangle rings from sliding and just gives it a nice sleek look. And you have two beautiful no raw edge straps. Using the pattern piece, I've transferred my purse feet markings onto the exterior base. So I'm just gonna punch those holes. I am using screw-in purse feet, but there are pronged purse feet, whatever you have. I wouldn't say one's better than the other, but I'm just happen to use the screw-in version, just like this. It's got a cap. This is what I mean by the prong. You would push it through and then pull these open. So go ahead and get that through there. You do need a little screwdriver to install that. A little protective clear coating. I'm going to take that off. And the last one here. Okay, lastly, prong or the screw-in kind, I do like to take duct tape, or masking tape it rather, and put it on this wrong side just for added security so it can't twist and come out, or the prongs don't pull up or anything like that. So add that and set it aside. Now we're ready to assemble the bag. We've done all of our prep work. The handles are completed. Now we're going to put it together. So grab your two exterior pieces and your back slip pocket. Determine which one's going to be the front, which one's going to be the back. I'm going to do this one as the back, and we're going to line up the center markings along the bottom together here. You'll notice that each main piece does taper to a shorter measurement along the top versus the bottom. And you also notice this is the top because it doesn't have the Ecoweld up top here. So these center markings are matched up. I'm going to take one of my handle accents, peel off that paper backing, line up the center of this with the center of the edge of the pocket. And it also happens to line up with the marking from our pattern piece that we added to the bottom there. I'm going to just stick that in place. Do it for both sides, right center, center. Okay, I'm just getting this prepped here. We're gonna repeat on this. So this had our guide with the pocket. It was easier to do. That's why the markings along the bottom are super important for this part, so that we have them centered. So here's my marking. Here's the center of this. And we're gonna just go straight up. And right here, marking, centered, straight up. So this is the front of my pocket. And this is why we had to make sure we are done with our handles already, because now we're gonna go ahead and add those. So we've got our pretty rolled handles all painted and dried. And we're gonna go ahead and wrap this. So determine the curve. We want the painted edge towards the back. Likewise with our flat handle, we want the joining seam towards the back. So that that's what you see when the handle's up. When you seam down, you'll see the seam this way. All right, so find the curve, wrap this short end around the handle, and we're gonna wrap it a full inch, and it's gonna line up with the bottom of our false stitching here on both sides. Stick that down and repeat with this side. Match it up, bottom of your stitching, which this will be from here to here is 1 inch. Stick it down. And then we're gonna take it to the machine and start at the bottom, go up. We're gonna sew into our previous stitches, get as close to this rectangle ring as possible, going around across here and then back down. But we're gonna be securing that back edge. So you don't wanna start and cross right here or you won't catch that back edge. So go up, across, and down on both sides. So I tend to start with one side, go around, down, cross this bottom, up, and down. Now for the back pocket, we're gonna repeat this process, but we want this to go around the back of the pocket. We don't want it to sit in front or this will not be encased. So find your curve, find the painted edge, it goes towards the back. Wrap that around, line it up with your stitching, and the bottom of the bar is going to sit right at the top edge of your pocket. You can see it's going around the pocket. I'm going to repeat with this one. My pocket's moving a little bit. Go around the pocket to the edge there. Here we go. And then up the sides, across, and down. Okay, so I have swapped out to a narrow foot, so when I sew up this long edge and I'm pivoting up near the rectangle ring, I can get as close to the rectangle ring as possible without being pushed away. And then I'm going to want to be careful when I pivot at the rectangle ring and not put my foot down across that bar because I can scratch my leather. So I do like to have a piece of scrap fabric or leather to lay down over my good leather so that the bottom of my foot doesn't scratch my leather on my handle accent. So just gonna go slow up this side and be very careful that once we come up to the previous stitching to sew right over those same stitch line. So just gonna hand crank this so I can be extra careful, and I want to get as close to the rectangle ring as possible. Then I'm gonna pivot right along that edge of the rectangle ring and then go up. I try and keep it in line with the stitching on the pocket, and then I'm gonna lift up my foot to pivot again, but before I let it drop, I'm gonna put that scrap piece behind it so I don't scratch that leather with my foot. And then once that's protecting it, then I'll go ahead and continue sewing down this opposite long edge. Then I usually just pivot and sew across this bottom pocket. It will close off that pocket, but then again, sewing on the base will also close the pocket. So just go across the bottom. Then once we get to the other handle accent, we're going to pivot and go back and do the same process going up this side. Again, go slow once you get to your previous stitches. Hand crank right there if you need to. Pivot at the side. Sew across that short edge. Then once again, pivot, lift up your foot, and use my scrap piece of leather. Lay that in position and back down. Now I like to add rivets right here at the stress points for the handle, and just for also aesthetic purposes, we got the rivets here. I like to add them here as well. So I'm gonna go just above this line here and punch my hole. Same thing with this one. So since this is the back and this is my front, now would also be the time to add a bag tag if you're wanting to do that on the exterior. So I'm gonna cut my slits and add my bag tag. I added my metal label. I like to center it between the two rectangle rings, but you can put it wherever you want. All right, so now we're gonna take our bag base with the purse feet and we're gonna lay it right sides facing on top of the exterior. It doesn't matter if you do the front or the back first, but we're going to clip in place, lining up those centers, and sew a 3/8 seam allowance here. Then we'll press it open, and we're going to push the lining towards the base, and we're going to top stitch on the base. Sewing a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Back stitching at the beginning and the end here. Then you're gonna go ahead and fold this open, and it naturally wants to fold down. The seam wants to stay down, that's how you're gonna leave it. So just finger press, keeping that seam down, and we're gonna just top stitch an 1/8 inch from the seam there. And now we're going to do the exact same thing with the other side. Right sides together, clip in place, top stitch. Next, we're going to grab our side gusset pieces. You'll notice this also has the Ecoweld cut 1 inch short from the top. The bottom is what has the little notched out corners. So you're going to take one and you're going to lay it right side face down against the right side of the top part of this bag, and it doesn't matter which side you do first, okay? So we're just gonna clip this top edge together, line these up, and then you'll notice the notch comes right to the edge of your bottom base. So you're gonna sew a 3/8 inch seam allowance ending right there. Using a 3/8 inch seam allowance, I am sewing this edge. Right when I get to that point, which is at the base of the bag, we're gonna back stitch and stop here. Next, I'm gonna take this top edge and line it up with the opposite side of the bag and clip that in place. And it should line up right with the base as well. We're not gonna do the bottom yet. We're just clipping this in place, and we're gonna start right at that notch there and do another 3/8 inch seam allowance. Can get kind of tricky because now you're dealing with your handles and stuff, and this wants to move out of the way. So just make sure that you clip it well and hold it with your fingers as best as you can, and you're gonna move that out of the way. Start the base there. Line up those edges. Okay, last but not least, we're gonna go ahead and line up the edge. I like to keep, because we top stitch that bottom towards this, so pinch that going towards the base here, and same thing here, pinch this edge towards the base and clip. Right there, keeping those edges lined up. Now this part can be a little awkward, but you're starting your stitch right where you left off, and you're going across and ending right where you left off as well. So you just kind of have to manhandle your bag, lay it down, get it flat there, and find where you ended, get your needle started, and then move your stuff out of the way. All right, then we're gonna go ahead and repeat the same steps doing the other side of the bag, but we wanna take a peek inside here first to make sure that our corners look good. They're not bunched, there's not a hole. It looks nice before we move on, and I'm happy with that, looks good. My exterior is sewn. And now we're gonna go ahead and trim down the seam allowances to about an 1/8 inch, 1/4 inch. I usually don't trim this part because I'm gonna press that open, but I do like to trim the rest of this away on the bag. So I kind of start at the Ecoweld, trim it down. Repeat the other side. I suppose it's more of a 1/4 inch. I mean, whatever you're comfortable with. I wouldn't go crazy close to the stitching. You wouldn't want to pull it apart, but it does have the Ecoweld, so that also stabilizes near that seam. All right. So now we're going to go ahead and turn our bag right side out. And I say to peek in and look at the corners because you really only want to turn this once. We're not birthing it, it's going to be a drop-in. And I don't want to keep turning this because I don't want to risk wrinkles. So if you didn't check your corners and then you check it and notice that it looks wonky after you turn it, then you got to turn it right back out and re-sew it. And chance of more wrinkles. So push out those corners. All right, starting to look like a handbag. Here we go. So then I like to lay it on its side and do the best that I can, getting my iron inside here and pressing these seams open. Once I've pressed all the seams open inside, then I'm gonna fold these top edge down a 1/2 inch so that the top raw edge lines up with the Ecoweld light, and press that crease. And then I'm gonna fold it right at that edge one more time, press that the crease, and clip it in place and hold it as I go ahead and start this exact same process with the interior liner. Now grab all of the lining pieces and we're gonna repeat the exact same process as we did with our exterior. So we've got our slip pocket piece, our bottom base, and then this will be the front of the bag. So we're gonna clip them right sides together, and with the lining though, we are doing a 1/2 inch seam allowance because we want it to be a nice snug fit and not baggy and really tight in there. So that is the only difference, and that's the only thing we're changing up for the lining, is doing 1/2 inch seam allowances for all the pieces. And when we're gonna be folding over the exterior top edge over the liner, so I'm not worried about grading it where I start at 3/8 inches and then go out to a 1/2 inch. I'm just doing a straight 1/2 inch on all of the seams. I'm gonna go ahead and trim the seam allowances down, but I start more down here so that I can add double-sided tape because this is waterproof canvas and it doesn't press well, so that I can lay the edges flat on all 4 corners. So like I said, I start a little ways down and then trim the seam allowance because we want a nice even fit inside the bag, and we don't want this seam to be pushing the lining and making it really baggy inside. And repeat with the other side. Okay, now before moving on to doing the zipper panels, we want to do a test fit because we want to trim this down if for some reason it's too tall for to fit inside here. So the front, this is the back side of my bag, so I need to flip it around. I've already got it clipped 2-fold here, and I'm just going to test fit this inside. You're leaving it wrong side out, and I'm going to push those corners snugly together. And then keep going here. Push them inside. So now when you line this up and it's pushed flush in, the top edge of this raw liner should meet the top folded edge of this. So they're a good fit. Now, if you're finding that your liner is excess like this, you're gonna need to trim it down, and you wanna trim it down before you add the zipper panel, because ultimately what we're gonna end up doing is we're gonna unfold it once, line the top of this raw edge with the top of the Ecoweld, and then clip it in place that way. So make sure your liner is the correct size before moving on. Grab your 12-inch zipper and your 4 zipper panels. I've cut 4 of the exterior fabric, so just determine which one's going to be your exterior, what's going to be your liner. It really doesn't matter. If you are using metal zipper tape, you want to make sure you're threading your zipper pull-on in the direction of the teeth. So leaving the front part open, we're going to turn these at a 90-degree angle, and then we're going to add a zipper end cap to the closed end. So flipping all of these pieces over, we are going to draw a line 3/4 inch in from one of those short edges. So I'm just going to kind of line them all up at the same time. Taking a marking tool, I'm going to draw that line. Then on just the exterior pieces, so again, pick 2 of them, you're going to draw a 3/8 inch line. Draw my line there. Okay. So now we need to prep our zipper. So we're going to open one end, and we're going to mark a 1/2 inch in from these short ends. I'm just going to add a little bit of marking to the tape on this side. Then we're going to pinch right at that marking, and it creates a fold and wants to tug the teeth to the side. So I'm gonna help with this finger. I'm gonna pull that down and line the fold up exactly with the teeth. So it's lined up with the edge here. And you can either pin or clip it in place, and we're gonna take it to the machine and base that in place. We're gonna repeat the same process with this edge. Use your finger to guide the fold back and out of the way. So, let go. I'm gonna use a pin, I think. The pin will work better. But you're gonna have two 90-degree angles like this that will complete that top edge. So I have my 90 degrees basted in place with some stitching there. So I'm gonna set that aside. Now the ends with the 3/4 inch marking, you're gonna fold the raw edge into that line and press with your iron. This is gonna be for all 4 panels. Okay, so now I have the line for my exterior panels. What we're gonna want to do is take these and we're gonna lay them right sides together and sew a 3/8 inch line here. Alrighty. So we got these folded, everything should be lined up. We're just gonna open up our panels like this, and we're gonna take one of the 90-degree angles, we're gonna put the zipper face down and tuck that zipper edge right inside here, and then fold it back right on top. Clip that in place, and then line up the, I'm gonna go ahead and open up your zipper. I like to put a clip on the end so my zipper pull doesn't come off, and then line up. You're gonna sandwich your zipper inside here. Now when you get to the end, you wanna make sure that the edges are folded, and clip that fold, and that they're lined up right there. Okay. So I like to sew from the folded edge first, just to make sure those are lined up. Get my pull out of the way. Make sure they stay folded, and using a 3/8 inch seam allowance, I tend to just butt my normal foot up against the teeth, but you can use a zipper foot if you'd like. Make sure your 90-degree angle is still tucked in there. And back stitch. Okay, so then we're gonna wanna trim this down and across the corner, and then flip it right side out and press it. Just like that. Now we're gonna top stitch an 1/8 inch from the edge across here, and then along the joined, the folded edge. And then lastly, we'll just kind of base these two edges together. Now we need to repeat the same exact process with this other side. So we have these folded edges in, and we're gonna have to sew our 3/8 inch line across here. I just sewed my 3/8 inch seam allowance. I'm gonna go ahead and open this up. And then again, we want the right side of the zipper down, tucked into the edge here. So this is gonna go right up against the seam. This is gonna sandwich right on top of it. And I find it very, very awkward to do one side and very easy to do the other side. I don't know if it's a right brain thing, left brain thing, or just trying to do a mirror image of something, but that is why I'm showing you this process again, because it just confuses me. Maybe it confuses you too. Okay, so line up those folded edges and clip them. So your zipper should be sandwiched in there. Okay. Some people swear by tape at this point to keep things from shifting, or basting it first and then doing the sandwich. You do whatever works best for you. Okay. Turn this down, this down. And then we're just gonna trim off this corner and trim down the short edge. And then tuck it right side out, push that corner out. Just gonna slide over here to the iron and press it again. Getting tangled. Flip it. All right, keep these ends matching up, put them in place, and clip this raw edge. And I'm gonna actually use my other machine so that I can have the matching red top stitching. But here we go. Start here, go across, and here. And your zipper panel will be done. Now I just want to fold it in half so I can mark my centers here. And then I'm going to go ahead and add my end cap here. So what you do is you just fold it to the wrong side, slide it on. You can add some glue if you want. I do find that the screw is enough. I don't tug on this, and I don't worry about that, but find your little screwdriver and you screw it all the way in until you meet resistance. Give it a tug. It's on there pretty good. There we go. With the liner in front of me, the back pocket going towards the back, I'm gonna unzip my panel completely. So now the zipper pull is on the right, and I am going to line up those center markings and clip this together. So the front side of the zipper is up. Clip that. Flip it around. Front side of the zipper is up. Centers are matched up here. And clip in place. And we're going to take this over to the machine and baste an 1/8 inch across that raw edge on both sides. I just added those pieces of tape to the seam allowances here so that I can press these open. And then I'll hold that with the clip. And I trimmed pretty close below that so that it can fit snugly into my bag. So based on tester and customer feedback, people wanted to know if you could add a crossbody strap. The more I thought about it, I thought, yeah, that would be kind of cute, but it was a struggle to figure out where to hook it so that it laid nice, you didn't have any issues, because I used a fat rectangle ring here. I can't clip a swivel clasp here. It wouldn't fit. Plus then it hangs and pulls stress right here. So one of my testers added D-rings on each side inside here so that it hangs down out of the way if you don't want your crossbody strap, or you have the option of adding a crossbody strap and it's there. Or it even gives your customer the option of, you know, clipping keys there or whatever. So you can use fabric, or in my case, I'm gonna use a piece of leather. And I just cut about a 5-inch strip. Nope, 4-inch strip. And I'm gonna cut that in half. Because it's non-fraying, I'm not worried about it. But if you're using all fabric, you're gonna wanna do that 4-fold method. So you're gonna take the width of your D-ring and double that and fold it to the inside. So this is a 1/2-inch D-ring. You're gonna cut it 1 inch and fold it to the center and then wrap it. But because this is non-fraying, I'm just gonna do the 1 width and do it like this. So then you can either sew up along here, or you could add some double-sided tape, but you're gonna add it just next to your zipper panel here and baste that in place on one side, left side on this side, and flip your bag around, and you're gonna repeat it with the other D-ring in this piece here. So when we fit it inside our bag and fold it over, that's gonna be encased. And then when it's all done, I will add a rivet here for security so that there's no stress on that folded seam here, and I'll show you that in a little bit, but I'm gonna go ahead and baste these in place so that I do have that crossbody strap option. We are at the home stretch, guys. I just basted in a D-ring here and a D-ring there. So now I'm gonna take my exterior, the front is facing me, and then the liner with the pocket going towards the back, and we're gonna put it back inside. So the liner is wrong side out, exterior is right side out. Push those corners back in nice and snug. Nice and snug down in there. And then I like to line up the 4 corners first and then ease everything else in place. So I had the folded edge clipped so that it has that little memory when you unfold it. Line up right at the top of that Ecoweld and then fold that over, line those up and flip. Same thing here. Find your, right at the top of the Ecoweld light, fold it over, line up your seams better than I do. There you go. Flip. Flip it around, other edges. Same thing. Find the seam, top of the Ecoweld light, fold your seam back down. All right, so now that I've got all 4 corners, I'm just gonna ease in the rest. Everything's now clipped in place. I folded it over. You wanna just do a quick once over and make sure, if you need to check with a seam gauge, that it is equal all the way around, because this is gonna be, the bottom edge is gonna be your guide for sewing this top edge, because we're gonna sew from the inside, keeping our foot along this folded edge. So I tend to start either on the back of the purse on a straightaway because it's easiest, versus on the side because it gets awkward in the side. But then when it's pinched in, if you have a start and a stop or a bunching or anything, it's not as noticeable on the side. So do what works for you. Again, I'm gonna kind of start on a long edge just because it's easiest for me to start there. Kind of manhandle your machine. You gotta do what you gotta do. Get right at the edge of the fold. And I don't backstitch. I'm gonna pull my threads back and tie it off, so it kind of hides that start and stop stitch a little bit better. It's a little awkward. Just gotta manhandle it. So this is where you kind of hand crank Position it as best as you can. It's awkward, I get it. If you have one of those machines where you can take the arm off, or a cylinder arm, this would be a breeze, but I don't have the option, so I work with what I got. Oops, I think I'm caught on something over here. I'm not doing a sped up version of this, so you can see that it's awkward for me too. It's awkward for you, it is awkward for me too. I'm going to do a back stitch over my D-ring, because again, this is kind of a stress point if you have a crossbody strap there. Kind of in the way, pull it out of the way. Almost coming back to the start. Here's my other D-ring, so I'm going to back stitch over that. And end up where I started. And tie it off. Alright, since we added the D-ring and you're going to pull it up with the crossbody strap, I'm going to add a rivet here so that it's not stressing this area. So you either do multiple stitches there if you don't want to see a rivet, but it'll get camouflaged within the fabric, and I would prefer to do that so that when it connects here, the stress is on that rivet. So I'm gonna go ahead and use my hole punch and do that right now on both sides here. And then add the rivets. Okay, last step and you will be done. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and line up the gusset seams together like that and clip it in place on both sides. Same thing here, gusset, clip. So then we're gonna use that 1-inch test box that I told you to cut out and save, this little guy, and we're gonna clip it right there at the corner and add a marking on the interior corner here. We're gonna do that on both sides. Line up the corner with the corner of your gusset there. Mark this right here. Then you, again, punch a hole in your completed bag. It's a little scary, but this is where our snaps are gonna go. But you wanna punch through both sides at the same time. Now you're gonna have, this is the back of my bag right now, and then this is the front. So you wanna make sure that when you add your male and female portions, that you're doing it on the same side. So this is goes with this piece. And that's a little bit more noticeable than the male portion. So I want that part on the front of the bag so it's not as visible if I unsnapped it. So I put the long post in through the back, short post goes on this side, and I'm gonna do the same thing on this side so that they match. Short post, or the long post and then the short post. I just clip them right now and then I'll officially set them. So then flip the bag around and then the female portion. So the pretty side actually goes on the inside of this bag here. And then it would go like this so that when you poke it in, you have a male and a female portion to set. So push the other one on that side. So I'm gonna go ahead and set those right now. All right, snaps are installed. So what I like to do is I just give this a pinch here and snap that. I like to pouch that out a little bit. I like the look of that. It's up to you though. There's that. Push that out a little bit. And then I do have a strap ready to go. Clip that on there. And this on here. And zip up our zipper. Look how cute your little handbag is.